It began with silence. A silence so thick that even the thousands of voices waiting to erupt in cheers seemed to hold their breath. The lights dimmed, the camera zoomed in, and there he was, Jungkook, usually composed, usually radiant with that golden confidence, now standing still, eyes glistening. Something had shifted. Something unexpected was about to unfold, and nobody could have predicted how deeply it would touch not just his fans, but anyone who has ever carried the weight of ambition, pressure, and unspoken emotion. The story of that moment, when Jungkook couldn't hold back his tears and Jimin's hug became the highlight, is not just about two global superstars sharing a private emotion on a public stage. It's about humanity. It's about the cost of carrying a brand as massive as BTS, the vulnerability behind the spectacle, and the lesson all of us can take into our own lives, businesses, and dreams. But to fully understand why that single embrace captivated millions, we need to peel back the layers and trace how we got here. For years, Jungkook has been celebrated as the Golden Magne, the youngest member whose talent knows no bounds, singing, dancing, performing at levels that seem almost superhuman. He's the kind of figure that corporations dream of building campaigns around, the perfect representation of youth, growth, and global appeal. Yet perfection comes with a price. Behind the flawless choreography and the mesmerizing performances is a young man navigating extraordinary pressure. And that night, when his composure cracked, the world saw more than just a tear. It saw the real cost of greatness. But here's where it gets more mysterious. Why at that moment? Why after so many years of performing under even harsher circumstances? What made this particular event so overwhelming? Fans who were there described the atmosphere as electric but tense, almost like everyone knew something big was coming. And when Jungkook spoke, his voice trembling, the confession he shared wasn't just about exhaustion. It was about gratitude, fear, responsibility, and the vulnerability of standing at the top. This is where Jimin enters the frame. Jimin, known for his warmth, his quiet strength, and his ability to read emotions almost before they're spoken. As Jungkook's words began to falter, Jimin stepped in, not as a bandmate, not as a performer, but as a brother. His arms wrapped around Jungkook in a moment that was unscripted, raw, and deeply human. It was that hug, not the lights, not the choreography, not the spectacle, that became the highlight. Because in that instant, millions of people watching around the globe remembered that at the heart of the world's biggest band are human beings, just like us, grappling with the enormity of their journey. And this is where the story widens. Think of branding, not just BTS's branding, but your own. A brand isn't built on flawless presentation alone. The most magnetic brands, the ones people remain loyal to for decades, are those that balance excellence with authenticity. Jungkook's tears weren't a weakness. They were a moment of authenticity so powerful that they strengthened the brand itself. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with truth. And that is why the hug went viral. It wasn't planned. It wasn't polished. It was real. Now imagine this principle applied to your own growth. Whether you're building a career, a company, or simply a life worth remembering. How often do we hide our tears, fearing they'll make us look weak? How often do we push ourselves to be perfect, forgetting that people are drawn not to perfection, but to connection? Jungkook's moment teaches us that embracing vulnerability can actually elevate value. In business terms, it's the difference between a brand that people recognize and a brand they love. But wait, here's the teaser. Because if you think that was the end of the story, you'd be mistaken. What Jungkook revealed afterward, in quieter interviews and behind-the-scenes glimpses, hints at a larger transformation, a transition from being just an idol to being a voice of resilience. He started to speak not just as an artist, but as a human navigating change, and that shift is where his long-term influence lies. Fans who once admired him for his talent now admire him for his honesty. That evolution is the secret to sustainable growth, both for individuals and for organizations. Think about it. Businesses that last are businesses that evolve. Apple didn't stay just a computer company. Nike didn't stay just a shoe company. And BTS isn't just a boy band. They're cultural architects shaping conversations about identity, ambition, and connection. Jungkook's tears, framed by Jimin's embrace, weren't a breakdown. They were a breakthrough. They marked the moment when the narrative shifted from idol perfection to human connection. The climax of this story is not the tears themselves, but the silence after them. The audience was hushed, the cameras still rolling, and the world collectively leaned in. That silence was the sound of authenticity resonating. And it reminds us of a powerful truth. Sometimes the most impactful thing you can do is allow yourself to be seen, unguarded, unpolished, human. From a branding perspective, what happened that night is a masterclass. Vulnerability became visibility. Emotion became engagement. And authenticity became the ultimate premium value. For anyone watching, whether you're a fan, an entrepreneur, a student, or a dreamer, the takeaway is clear. Don't be afraid to show the cracks in your armor. Because it's through those cracks that the light gets in. As the moment drew to a close, Jungkook stood taller, his tears wiped, but not forgotten, his voice steadier, his heart lighter. And Jimin's hug wasn't just comfort, it was a statement. You don't have to carry the weight alone. For global icons like BTS, that message echoes louder than any stadium scream. But for us too, it's a reminder. Whatever stage you're standing on, your workplace, your startup, your personal life, you don't have to do it alone. Support, authenticity, and vulnerability aren't weaknesses. They're the foundation of sustainable strength. So here's the closure. And it's not just emotional, it's a challenge. When was the last time you let yourself be real? When was the last time you dropped the mask of perfection and allowed others to connect with your truth? Whether you're running a business, creating art, or simply trying to grow, remember this: the highlight isn't always in the performance. Sometimes, the highlight is in the hug, the moment of raw humanity that reminds the world why you matter. If this story touched you, don't just watch and move on. Take the lesson with you. Apply it. Share it. And if you want to keep discovering more stories that aren't just entertainment, but also inspiration, make sure you stay connected right here. Because the journey doesn't end with a tear. It begins with what you do after it falls. Let's keep growing together. Let's keep exploring the moments that inspire, the stories that transform, and the lessons that shape not just stars, but all of us. And if you're ready for more, you know what to do. Stay tuned, subscribe, and step into the next chapter. The best stories are the ones we share, and this is what we need to reflect on. Jungkook and Jimin's moment was not just a stage story, but a mirror of our own lives. We've all felt tired, pressured, or held back tears. The difference is, they did it in front of millions of eyes. If they can show vulnerability and still be loved, why should we be afraid? That's where true strength is born, from the courage to be real, just as we are.